Welcome to another episode of The Watchdog with me, Low Key, here on Mint Press. And this week we have a very, very special episode, especially those on the UK side of things. You wouldn't have been able to escape a fantastic viral video of Audrey White confronting the leader of the Labour Party, Keir Starmer, and telling him some very, very difficult home truths.
I don't know how you've got the guts to come to this city after you have been being interviewed and doing columns for the Sun newspaper, after the way we as a city were abused, and after the way we as a city, the Hillsborough victims, were abused by that paper, and you've come here. Secondly, you lied to us about uniting the party. I'm still a Labour Party member, and you've expelled and witch hunted in the most vicious way I've ever seen in my lifetime. And I've been a member of the Labour Party for a long, long time. You have absolutely said you had 10 pledges, you were going to carry on the Corbyn legacy. And ever since, you've done nothing but distance yourself from the ideas which tens of thousands of people joined the Labour Party to support. And all you've done is feed into the Tory ideology of not supporting strikes, of carrying on with the privatisation of our health service. You're doing everything to feed into a Tory victory, because we may as well have a Tory if we have a person like you.
Now, I think it's important in this episode for us to go behind the viral video and look at who exactly Audrey White is, why she took this action to confront Keir Starmer, and how it is that she is expressing the thoughts and the feelings of hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people in this country today. So to start with, I just want to welcome to the show someone who was selected by BBC Radio 4 as one of the 100 most influential women of the century, Audrey White. Thank you so much for joining us from Liverpool today, Audrey.
Thanks very much for inviting me on. It's an absolute pleasure. And, I think that programmes like this are really important because our voices don't get heard. So I really do appreciate, you echoing, what happened there yesterday, because the mainstream media certainly aren't doing it.
Thank you. And also, I want to send my salutations to Merseyside Pensioners Association, to Phil Maxwell and everyone else involved in this brilliant and important video. So to start with, Audrey, if you could tell us a bit about what happened in the campaign in 1983 when you were a worker at the Lady at Lord John clothes store in Liverpool.
Well, it's a long time ago, but it doesn't seem so long ago to me. I was only 34 or something at the time, and I'd only started the job for about 12 weeks. And the staff uniform, I was the manageress, and the staff uniform was falling to bits. And if the girls had to pay for it themselves. So can you imagine if you were a customer, you'd have got a refund. But of course, it was the staff, low-paid staff. So I thought it was important that they get their uniform replaced. And I just mentioned to him that the manager, a Mr. Bond, would you believe, that the uniforms had fallen apart. And he proceeded then to actually manhandle the women. I mean, and said to one of them, "You've been had up against too many backyard wars." He pulled the bra strap down on the girl, and it was just awful. So I complained, and I have to go fast forward because it's a long story. I complained to him as the manageress and responsible for the welfare of the staff, and just said, basically, we can't accept that behaviour. He phoned me up at home, sacked me over the phone. I was crying down the phone, and I kept going into work, and they brought the police in on me. Nice. And I cut the story. The union got involved, and we picketed the store for 5 weeks. But what it did was it raised the whole question of sexual harassment, because we didn't even know the word. We didn't know what it meant. We were saying interfering with the staff. We didn't know the expression. So cut to the quick. It went on for so long, and I was being sued for £250,000. So was my brother, a young lad unemployed. So was the union. There's about 5 of us, most of the members of my family. So it was just all done to intimidate me. And it was frightening, to be honest with you. And there was 8 pickets arrested, my husband included. And one of the young pickets was a schoolgirl, and she was strip searched in the cell with the cell door open. So we just had to keep fighting, and we upped the ante against the firm, and basically started picketing them in Manchester, which is what you've got to do: picket them, keep up the pressure. Don't have it neutral. We picked up the political action. And the reason why we won, and everybody goes, oh my God, how can she say it? The only reason why we won is because we broke the law. And when I get invited to conferences by various unions, the union officials are sitting there and they're absolutely appalled, because nobody wants to talk about what it needs, what's required when there's injustice. When there's injustice, you fight it, and you fight it no matter what it takes. And we had to break the law of secondary picketing, and we did. And we risked being sued for £250,000. We risked the union being sued for £250,000. But we won it on behalf of women. And that led to changes in the law on sexual harassment. So I was very proud to be a part of it, because I was only a part of it. Because it was men and women on my picket line. It was dockers and car workers and the unemployed. It wasn't just all women stood there. It was mostly men, actually. And they were just absolutely superb, because they realised that sexual harassment is basically a class issue. It's health and safety at work. So it was a tremendous victory. And I love the solidarity. I've lived forever on that solidarity over that period of time, because I would have given in, really. I was just absolutely wretched over it. But I felt that these people, unemployed people, wanted me to go into that shop again. And that's what we did. It was great.
Fantastic, inspiring. And what were the exact changes in the law, if you can remember off the top of your head, that this campaign led to?
Well, it led to identifying that sexual harassment, was against the law, and that women had a recourse about sexual harassment. But of course, what it does mean is, who's going to police that law? And the employers certainly won't. And the police certainly won't. No one will come along and say, hang on, you McDonald workers, you're being sexually harassed, we'll defend you. It's only unions that will do that. So, with the weakening of the trade unions, it's meant that law, hasn't been as effective as it should be, because it's only us, it's only the unions that make sure women are protected.
Right. And then the struggle was made into a film, Business as Usual. Could you tell us a bit about that, please?
I was approached, we're basically going to be done for Channel 4 at first, and a script was put together and blah, blah, blah. And then the next thing, it was being made with Glenda Jackson playing me in the movie. And I wasn't really happy with the script, and a lot of guarantees were made to me, because I thought I wanted it to really explain. Doesn't have to be word for word my case, but it had to really explain what sexual harassment was. And the film that was made, really, it was about, one good-looking area manager who fancied Kathy Tyson, who played one of the members of staff. And it was almost as if it was like a grope in the fishing room, whereas it wasn't. Sexual harassment isn't about a man fancying somebody. It's about power, mostly over low-paid women and men. Men can be sexually harassed too. So the film was made, and I actually sued the people that made the film. because they broke a lot of the promises that were made. You know, they didn't show how vicious the company was. They didn't, in my opinion, really show how what sexual harassment, how pernicious it is, and it didn't. I don't think it moved the cause forward. But you know, now when I look back, it's great to have a film where a woman wins and the union wins. And for that, I really celebrate that film. But the real story is much more dramatic, much more serious, and much more important. So I was glad it was made, and it was an experience. And we need more films that tell the story of the labour and trade union movement. Definitely.
Absolutely. And you know, a lot of the audience for this channel are based in the US. Would you be able to break down for them what exactly happened at Hillsborough, and then the significance that the Sun coverage had in the way that that was received by people in Liverpool, please?
I mean, I wasn't in any way involved, so I'm not an authority on it, but I know from a Liverpudlian, just an ordinary person living in the city. I mean, even now, look, it chokes me to think about what happened. And it was all to do with, you know, really a vilification of the working class that was going on at that period. You know, it was like we didn't count. It was like we were hooligans, particularly people from Liverpool. You know, anything in theatre and the television and drama, it was always the Liverpudlians that were the bad guys. You know, the crooks, the liars, the thieves, and it was terrible. And it was, you know, working class people were vilified, and it was against that background that this awful disaster, which was due to overcrowding, it was due to bad policing, it was bad due to absolute inadequacy of the failure of the services to protect the people who were involved in going to that match that particular day in Hillsborough. And the people were, they were just, it was like murder, really. They were just crushed to death. Young people, mostly young people. And what happened then? There were 96 of them died. And we were brokenhearted, our city. There was hardly anybody. I'm sorry about this, I'm very emotional. And we were very, very upset about it. Most of us knew people who were killed. Women lost, you know, mothers and fathers lost their children, brothers and sisters and everybody. It was terrible. And then, of course, to add insult to injury, as a scapegoat for the police and the failure of the services and the viciousness of the Tory government at the time, and it all came from Thatcher, it all came from our Prime Minister, and people can argue that with me if they like, but it came from our Prime Minister, that Liverpool people were blamed for that disaster. It was a full 100% turnaround of the facts. That there was this newspaper then, all briefed by the government, were putting out in the press that Scousers were urinating on people as they were dying, that people were looking into their wallets and as if they were stealing from them. It was the most awful, there were the awful lies, and those lies went on, and they were picked up by all sorts of other papers. And it's took all these years, these decades, to get justice for those people. And they've now been vindicated. There was an apology by the Prime Minister of this country that actually they had to eat humble pie and say that it wasn't the Liverpool people that were to blame. It was a failure of policing. And, you know, we still haven't got real justice. That paper is still out there. And Liverpool had this fantastic campaign where they just won't buy the Sun. We don't even say the word Sun. If we write the word Sun, we put S, asterisk, and N, because it's such a filthy, dirty rag that, you know, we don't want it in our city. And that was why when Keir Starmer started to be interviewed by he's now got a column in that awful newspaper, and he had the gall to come to our city. So there's real anger from everybody. You don't have to be a Liverpool Football Club supporter. You don't have to be Labour even. You just have to know what's right and what's wrong in this world. To know what that newspaper did was absolutely the pits.
A lot of what you have done, when one looks at it, is about confronting and struggling against these key elements and these key purveyors of class war. So Keir Starmer essentially is there to continue class war. You look at The Sun and you look at Rupert Murdoch, for example. You know, it's well known that in 1986, when you had the dispute with the pressing plant workers at Wapping, you had almost 6,000 workers going on strike, and Murdoch instantly firing them. But at that point, you had this very deep integration between Rupert Murdoch and the security services, because Special Branch actually at that time subjected the dispute to intense surveillance, producing written daily briefs on all aspects of the pickets. Also, you had the infamous spy cop, Bob Lambert, who later led the Special Demonstration Squad and dispatched Peter Francis to spy on Jeremy Corbyn. And then Bob Lambert later headed the Muslim Contact Unit, where he had dealings with Jeremy Corbyn while Corbyn was the MP for Finsbury Park. That Bob Lambert actually at that time, as a spy cop, infiltrated the picket lines outside the Wapping plant. And it is well known also that Murdoch's News Corps, and this is according to The Guardian, not me, effectively avoided paying any corporation tax in the UK for 11 years, despite extracting astronomical profits from the country. And also, according to the Washington Post, News Corps reduces tax by channeling profits through a complex web of subsidiaries in low tax locations like the Cayman Islands and Bermuda. So, as we've already touched on, a lot of this is about the presentation of class war. And you've had to not only take on whether it's the film company behind the film about your own situation, but also you've taken on the Jewish Chronicle. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, could I just say something about the print union? You do know that in Liverpool, in Warrington actually, there was a printing company out there, and it was called in Winnick Quay. Very, very famous dispute out there around the time of all this going on in London. And we had the most vicious, we were battered by the police. There's a beautiful poem I've got actually written by someone about, the women with their peroxide curls, blood in their hair from the truncheons, from the police at that time. And it's interesting that the man who was in charge of that company was called Eddie Shah. Eddie Shah was a massive friend of Margaret Thatcher. And it was another thing that was engineered. And we know there were police spies at that time. It was nothing new. It was no revelation to us. But yeah, just to go back to the Jewish Chronicle, of course, to undermine the Corbyn project, this Jewish labour movement was reinvigorated around this time. And they really did use this as a weapon. And what I think is really disgusting. I mean, if you were Jewish and you own a newspaper, why would you lie and make Jews feel afraid? Why would you do that if it wasn't true? Well, you'd think, well, they wouldn't do a thing like that. That's what you'd think. I was just an ordinary member of Riverside constituency Labour Party. I'm still a member. And this, my MP is Louise Ellman, a Jewish MP, a Jewish member of the Labour Party. I had no problems with her religion. I did have real problems with her politics, but even on that basis, I was very, very polite. And I've always made it very clear what my differences were. And yet the Jewish Chronicle published a series of 4 articles which basically said that I was bullying her, that I was a liar. It was a whole tranche of, as I call it, a litany of lies. It took me a year, printed about me, to feed into this narrative. And it was all done to undermine a real socialist government, because they knew if Corbyn won, we had a massive party. We had 600,000 people in that party. The people flocked to listen to Corbyn wherever he went, that the manifesto was tremendous. It was costed. We've got this wonderful accountant, Prem Seeker, who costed it. He sits in the House of Lords. He costed everything that we were going to do. It was tremendously powerful. And to stop it, they had to make these disgusting lies on any issue they could. And of course, they chose anti-Semitism, which was a filthy, disgusting thing to say about anybody. But to say it about Jeremy Corbyn was an absolute abomination. So they started to try to attack me. And I had a call from Lee Harpin, absolutely awful character, who was the reporter for the Jewish Chronicle. And he published all this stuff about me. And after a year of doing research and destroying, everything I could in their argument, there was 10 breaches of the code of the Independent Press Standards Organisation. 10. That's the longest. That's the most anyone has ever been charged with. It was the longest adjudication any newspaper has ever had to publish. In other words, it was all a load of bunkum. And guess what? There was nothing in the press that I'd been vindicated. Nothing in the press. This is during an election. Nothing in the press to say that, oh, hang on a minute. What's all this about anti-Semitism? There's an MP there who's saying she's getting bullied out the party. The only thing they've come up with is Audrey White. Audrey White's just proven it's all a load of lies. And you know what? I made myself ill trying to get that in the press. I really did. I ended up and I don't say it lightly, I ended up in hospital because I was so frustrated and angry that I couldn't get that story out there, not to defend me, to defend Corbyn, because we needed a Corbyn. We desperately needed the ordinary working class people in this country desperately needed a good socialist Labour government. It helped to destroy the whole of the movement. It really did. And they got away with it. But I won. I won my case. And I think if more of us had been more determined to knock it in the head the minute it started, the minute they opened their lying mouths, and they were lying, and I proved it. And since then, there's been a whole series of people exposing what went on at that period. And yet, if you say it in the Labour Party, Keir Starmer will expel you. And he can't expel me for that because I proved it was right. I was set up by the right of the Labour Party, and it was the right of the Labour Party that sent all the lies to the Jewish Chronicle about me. Absolutely, I've got the evidence for that. So it was a terrible, disgusting tactic of the right. They will stoop at nothing. Honest to God, there's no level they won't go to stop real change, the change that's needed for working class people in this country. And those dirty tactics of using anti-Semitism as a weapon against ordinary members and the leader himself, it was something else.
Well said, Audrey. And I think also it's worth remembering that at that time when the Board of Deputies were sanctimoniously dictating to the Labour Party, both member and the Parliamentary Labour Party, both the membership and the Parliamentary Labour Party, basically what they had to do to prove themselves not to be racist. If one were to say that the Board of Deputies had a close working relationship with the Israeli embassy at that time, that would have been an expellable offence, right? Okay, well, in 2020, in the Board of Deputies' own trustees' report, this is post-Corbyn not being leader, they put the following sentence: "We have a close working relationship with the Israeli embassy and strengthened links to the Ministry of Strategic Affairs and the IDF." This is the Board of Deputies 2020 Trustees Report, which is on the Charity Commission website. So to merely state the fact at that time would have got you expelled from the Labour Party, and actually an inability among many of us to actually name what was being done to us was a key part of not fighting back, you know. And as you showed, most of the time, when you do fight back, you win. It's when you retreat, it's when you cower that you lose.
Yeah.
So, yeah. If
absolutely.
You expand on that.
I've always said all my life. I mean, I don't think I've gained an awful lot from it, but I've always said you fight injustice wherever you see it. And it's not a tactic. People say, oh, well, you know, you have to choose your battles and all the rest of it. No, I'm sorry. If it's wrong, it's wrong. And if you don't win, do you know what? I mean, Ken Loach says things like, well, he said to me, you don't ask people what they're going to do. You ask people what they've done. So, okay, you've been in the Labour Party and you fight against what's happened and you get expelled. So what? You get expelled, but you've stood up and you've done the right thing. You've shown solidarity with your comrades. And that's what should have happened. The socialist group of MPs, they should have been showing Jeremy Corbyn solidarity. Every one of them should have walked across and sat with him and stayed with him. And if it meant the whip, it meant the whip. Who was in the whip? Let's just show solidarity on things like the war. You know, they've all backed down from putting their names to a statement by the Stop the War organisation. You know, I got to know a lot of people in the movement through my work in the being one of the founding members of Merseyside Stop the War Coalition. And I'll tell you what, if you're afraid to stand against war, what's the point of being an MP? What's the point of trying to say that you represent someone, because most people are against war? So I'm sorry I'm going off the point here, but it really is about being aware that there is dark forces in this country that work against, work in the interest of the establishment of capitalism, and they're everywhere. It's not like oh gosh, what's Audrey saying there? You know, we've met people from Spycop who've been spied on, who've written books, and you know, give real life experiences of this. But we've seen it our lives. We've got our own experiences about it. We've seen it in the flesh and been victims of it ourselves. So, you know, we have to be very aware that if we've got to fight so hard for change in this country. We've got one of the most backward ruling classes in the world. Absolutely the most backward ruling class in the world. And you've seen where we are today. And if only we'd have not been defeated by the right wing of the Labour Party, the elements in there that are politically opposed to real change for working class people, we may have been in an entirely different position today.
What can you say about how the witch hunt has affected members in Liverpool specifically?
I think Liverpool were absolutely targeted from, Merseyside generally, because it started with the famous brick. Do you remember there was a brick supposed to be thrown through the window by, you know, obviously they didn't know who threw the brick, but they tried to make out it was where the brick wasn't even thrown, actually. I think the whole brick story was a fake. And it was made out that, you know, that as if the right were under attack by some thugs on the left, and it was absolute nonsense. So that was started over on the Wirral there, on one of the Eagles, I've forgotten which one it was now, one of the MPs. And then, of course, it was with Luciana Berger in Wavertree, with the Wavertree Four, and it was the same with us in Riverside. And there was terrible things being said, and we were undermined, all of it, so undemocratic, and a lot of it came from the regional office, Labour Party regional office, which has been exposed recently in the Ford report and the leaked report. And that's probably a bit complicated for people if you're living in America trying to make sense of what's going on. But we have to say that the people that were employed in the Labour Party, supposed to be servicing, this party and the political aspirations of the members, as reflected in our conferences, that they actually worked against us. And that's what's happened. And so we ended up with people. Do you know what? I think some people were genuine in that they were going, let's not get involved in the anti-Semitism. Let's just go forward with the politics. Let's just go forward with the policies. And that had held an attraction, for some people. But what it did mean was you let your comrade fall by the wayside. You went, well, we'll just have to be quiet. We won't say anything about that. And it really did divide us. And some people were genuine and some people weren't. Some people were afraid of being labelled themselves. A witch hunt, a witch hunt is pernicious. It really is. People don't want to stick their necks out in case they're getting into something that might taint them. And people lost jobs. People were ill. People, I think there was even one suicide over it. It was just terribly, terribly destructive and divisive, and that's why as soon as a word about it, it should have been fought. And that is a failure of a lot of people, that they sort of, if we just got Corbyn in, but it was used to keep Corbyn out.
Exactly.
So it was awful.
Exactly. Audrey, can you describe to us what went through your mind when you approached Keir Starmer yesterday in Liverpool?
I couldn't believe that he had the gall to come to our city after writing in The Sun, and in the Sun newspaper. I couldn't believe it. I thought, how provocative is he? And let's face it, when Corbyn came, it was 10,000 people on a rainy Monday evening in the winter when he came to visit us. And of course, Starmer had to sneak in the back door of the Spine building to speak to business people. And then he had to sneak in the back door of my local restaurant. And lo and behold, he's in front of me with two wonderful filmmakers. So it was a gift. And we had people outside who were the most wonderful activists for our women's hospital, for the NHS, for all sorts of campaigns. They were stood outside. So we actually had him sandwiched between the window, which was facing with all these activists and banners in the window, and then we were the other side. And I just thought, do you know what? The press have let him. They've given him an easy ride. They haven't said anything to him, anything near. Well, there's been no criticism of him, never mind, comparing him to the way Jeremy Corbyn was treated. So I thought, well, the Parliamentary Labour Party don't criticise him. The press don't criticise him. And yet I know that there's tens and hundreds of thousands of people who must feel like me, betrayed, because he lied to us to become the leader of the Labour Party. He did. I said it to his face. He lied. He said, he was like his arm round Corbyn, and he was going to keep these 10 pledges, which were a bit of a faff of a weak version of some of the main points of our manifesto, wonderful manifesto that we had. And I thought, well, I've just got to tell him to his face. And I can't believe that that opportunity fell to us, and that he just sat there. I mean, he's talentless. He is like a block of wood. He looked me in the eye. I spoke to him directly in the eye and said, it's not honest what you've done. I've never seen a witch hunt like it. You witch hunted us. You told us you would unite the party and you didn't. All you've done is expel wonderful comrades who flocked to the party. And I did make a mistake. I said flocked to the party in their tens of thousands, when it was actually hundreds of thousands who flocked to join the Labour Party, as well as those hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people who flocked to hear him up and down the length and breadth of the country. It was tremendous. He was like a rock star. He was in Glastonbury. Everywhere you went, people were chanting his name. And he was a failure. We're being told he was a failure. And now we know why he didn't get in. We know that the British state worked against him. We saw it every day. And now we know that even those people that were in the Labour Party were actively working against him, as well as the Parliamentary Labour Party. So we had one chance to have a better world. We really did. And we won't give up. We will. Whatever way it takes, we will keep fighting. And I'm really glad that the debate is out there now. And this is the important thing, that video, all right, it was pensioners, it was this old woman giving him the payout, but it was a history of all of us as activists in the Labour movement who still have that determination to keep fighting and to tell how it is and not to be afraid, like these people, like the members of the Labour Party are, like the socialist group of MPs, like any honest person would do. They would be challenging him. And why do I know I'm right? Because there's nearly 2 million tweets of that now. There's 1.2 million on the Merseyside pensioners alone. The feedback from people, the phone calls, the texts, the messages, everything. People are over the moon that it's been raised, and the debate's only just starting. And he's finished. And we need a left-wing leadership. And if we don't get a left-wing leadership in the Labour Party, and they may have stitched us up permanently for that, we'll find another way. We'll either be on the streets, or we'll have a series of independents, or hopefully somebody with the stature of Jeremy Corbyn, with the leadership qualities that we need, will bring us forward to the radical changes that we need in society.
So, Audrey, just to ask, if you were not interrupted by Keir Starmer's minder and handler, who seemingly was very, very inappropriate and rough with you, what would you have continued to say to Keir Starmer yesterday?
Well, I had a few things that I wanted to say. I wanted to say that basically the conferences under Jeremy Corbyn were absolutely massively behind the Palestinians. And he, as opposed to him, who is a Zionist and in supporting the apartheid state of Israel. And that's not conducive to Labour Party values, as far as I'm concerned. I wanted to throw victory to the Palestinians, victory to the RMT and all the workers who were going on strike. I also wanted to say about NATO, how disgusting of him to have this attitude towards NATO and not to be calling for peace in Ukraine, for a settlement. Instead, he wants to stop any MP from saying anything that's, towards a resolution to that situation. And in fact, I could have gone all day. I could have gone all day, but to be honest with you, they're the points. I didn't talk about strikes, but I would like to have said about Palestine and world peace, and I think is very, very important. But as I say, I got distracted by a very, very being roughly handled by one of Keir Starmer's heavy guys.
Well, Audrey, if there's anything you'd like to add, please feel free to, but I am aware that your time is limited today. You will be in great demand throughout the day from many, so I appreciate you taking this hour to speak to us today. Thank you so much for joining us, Audrey.
Oh, you're very welcome. And can I just say, I've had so many phone calls from The Guardian, The Independent, the Telegraph, the Daily Mail, all the rest of them. Not. So I really am grateful to for social media, for all these fantastic platforms, and for you inviting me on. So solidarity, comrade. Thank you very much.
Solidarity, and I hope to see you and Phil very, very soon. Please give my love to Liverpool.
I certainly will. Thank you. You're well loved here. I can certainly say that you are well loved here.
Thank you so much, Audrey.
Thank you for all you do.
Thank you. Take care. Be safe.